This is the Brazil you already know. The time has come for you to know this other Brazil. We are the seventh economy in the world, a leader in Latin America, the fifth best country to invest in, the third largest agricultural exporter, the 10th largest industrial producer, the second largest iron ore producer. We have the 7th largest chemical industry in the planet. We manufacture from footwear to vehicles. We are trendsetters. We innovate. We give wings to those who want to fly next to us. And we surprise the world with our energy. We are creative, modern, bold, the 8th consumer market. With infrastructure, skilled labor force, and more than 8 million square kilometers of good opportunities. Behind those numbers is CNI. The National Confederation of Industry represents 27 states federations, more than 1,300 employer unions, and 420,000 enterprises. And it contributes to the Brazilian industry's increasing modernization, diversification, and integration into the global economy. This more competitive Brazil is also made with skilled labor. CNI is one of the largest systems of professional education in the world, which serves the industry demand in Brazil with over 800 schools. Through partnerships, the institution exports its Brazilian technology and methodology to the world. Throughout the country, SESI helps thousands of companies to promote a healthier industry. The worker discovers a new world, multiplies knowledge, gets more safety and health at work, free pass in sports, in culture, and there are plenty of reasons to smile. With an eye to the future and to business management, EL, Evaldo Lodi Institute, trains entrepreneurs and executives. That's it with education, culture, innovation, and health. That CNI helps to transform Brazil.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the National Confederation of Industry, Mr. Robson Braga de Andrade, joined by the United States Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, and the Governor of the State of Minas Gerais, Antonio Anastasia. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. The National Confederation of Industry, CNI, and the American Chamber of Commerce is honored to receive you for this meeting, Vision for the 21st Century Economic Partnership. Today's meeting has the aim of restating the commitment of the Brazilian private sector and closing our bonds with the United States. This important partner has a special place in the Brazilian commercial agenda. Opportunities for cooperation are many and must be strengthened. This visit gives continuity to the dialogue between these two countries and expresses our desire to achieve concrete results in some fundamental areas of our economies. We hand the floor to the President of the National Confederation of Industries, Mr. Braga. Ladies and gentlemen, United States Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, the U.S. Ambassador in Brazil, Mr. Thomas Shannon, the Secretary of Interior of the United States, Mr. Ken Salazar, the Governor of the State of Minas Gerais, Antônio Anastasia, the Brazilian Ambassador in the United States, Mr. Mauro Vieira, presidents of all the federations here present, all the businessmen, class entities, ladies and gentlemen, the National Confederation of Industry is very glad to host you here for the honorable visit by the U.S. Secretary of State, Ms. Hillary Clinton. We would like to express on behalf of the Brazilian industrial sector how glad we are for this meeting that takes place only a week after the visit by President Dilma Rousseff and a delegation of Brazilian businessmen to the United States. I'm sure that this meeting clearly expresses the attention given by the U.S. government to the Brazilian industry and the importance of strengthening the bilateral economic relations between these two countries and giving continuity to the partnership between governments and companies in both countries. Some important achievements for Brazilian companies have been accomplished since President Obama's visit to Brazil in March of last year. Among them, we could highlight the drop of the import tariffs on Brazil ethanol for the North American market, the renewal of the U.S. generalized system of preference until July 2013, and the revocation of the anti-dumping duties on Brazilian orange juice. Both countries have signed a trade and economic cooperation agreement and have signed an MOU on a partnership for aviation, which represent real opportunities for scientific cooperation, trade cooperation, and also an opportunity for bilateral investments. These are achievements that represent an increase in business opportunities and show the joint effort made by both governments and private institutions such as the American Chamber of Commerce, the Brazil-United States Business Council, and the National Confederation of Industries. We know how important it is to broaden and diversify trade and investments together with the United States. We're certain that the potential gains for the industries of America's two largest economies will allow for greater advances and diversification. We should adopt an agenda that will include measures to relieve the burden on bilateral investments, facilitate the movement of people, and foster business partnerships to explore new opportunities. Also, rediscussed non-tariff barriers and stimulate innovation. In a recent meeting between President Obama and President Dilma Rousseff at the White House, discussions were concentrated on cooperations in areas in which Brazil and the United States show great potential for integration. For instance, biofuels, energy, defense, airspace, food security, among others. Ladies and gentlemen, innovation and promotion of competitiveness in industry are priorities both for the Brazilian government and CNI. In this area, there is also room for a constructive partnership between Brazil and the United States. There are many opportunities for joint efforts in the areas of education, science, and technology, which are subjects that are increasingly important in the Brazilian industrial policy, and also can be seen in recent measure of economical stimulus adopted in the United States. Programs such as Science Without Borders and 100,000 Strong Initiative is a proof of the convergence of interests and the complementarity of both countries in these fields. I'd also like to highlight the continuous and sound actions of the Brazilian private sector in improving the environment for defending intellectual property. Coordinated by CNI, the entrepreneurial movement for innovation has been working closely with the Brazilian government, making progress in creating transparent mechanisms and agile mechanisms for the protection of companies that want to invest in science and research and the development of new products.
Companies in the U.S. or any part of the world will find in Brazil a nation that respects the intellectual property rights and that fosters innovation. In other areas of cooperation between the Brazil and the U.S., there is a lot to be done. The signing of an agreement in order to avoid double taxing will continue to be one of our priorities. Double taxing poses a burden on companies and diverts investments and trade to third countries. The opportunities for investments of U.S. companies in Brazil are infinite, particularly in the field of infrastructure. Projects in oil and gas, for instance, will require over $225 billion in the next few years. Our ports are being expanded and our airports are being granted to private initiative. 6 hydroelectric plants are being built, as well as hotel complexes in several capitals, with a view to the holding of the 2014 World Cup. Brazil welcomes the U.S. productive capital, especially capital that comes to form strategic alliances with a view to promoting competitiveness, developing technology, and intensifying production chains. Ladies and gentlemen, on this occasion, I must take the opportunity to highlight the efforts of the Brazil-U.S. Business Council in expanding dialogue and coordinating the actions of the private sectors of both countries. This continuous work has been yielding excellent results. Facilitation of the flow of people on business or tourism, increased trade, the growth of investments, and a more equitable tax treatment are part of the strategic agenda of the Council and merit our support. I reiterate the need for joint work between the government and the private sector of both countries in implementing the actions that are the object of agreements of the heads of state. We have the challenge of turning these initiatives into reality, and it is with this spirit that I invite you all to welcome the U.S. State Secretary Hillary Clinton.
Do we change the outgoing channel here?
No. No. It's the same channel.
Thank you very much. And it is, for me, a great pleasure to be here in Brasilia with leaders from government and business who are committed to strengthening the ties between our two countries. And I am so pleased that I could be here only 1 week after some of you were in Washington at the event that was held there for businesses, and the very successful visit of President Dilma Rousseff to Washington with President Obama. I see some faces that I saw in the crowd at the American Chamber of Commerce when I addressed you just a week ago, which is no surprise to me because this is such a critical partnership in so many dimensions. And its economic dimension is growing increasingly important, not only to the two countries that are represented here, but indeed to the region and the world. As many of you know, last year, trade between Brazil and the United States reached nearly $75 billion. much of that in sectors that are driving innovation and creating jobs in both our countries. And Brazilian investment in the United States has grown considerably in recent years, now standing at $15.5 billion, making it one of the largest sources of investment from Latin America. So this partnership is already benefiting both countries, and I thank the National Confederation of Industry and our co-hosts from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce for working to strengthen economic ties. But I'm here because I think we can do so much more. I believe that the opportunities and potential for greater investment, trade, growth, and jobs is only now being tapped. I was delighted this morning to meet with Graças Foster, the head of Petrobras, to talk about the exciting future that lies ahead of Brazil because of the extraordinary reserves off your coastline. And this opportunity carries with it a lot of responsibility, which she is shouldering. Of course, for me, it's exciting to be in a country where the head of your government and the head of your oil company are both led by such visionary, hard-working leaders who happen to be women. That's another good way in which Brazil is leading. It was 96 years ago today, this very day, that the U.S. Chamber opened its doors in Brazil. American companies like General Electric were just beginning to explore markets beyond America's borders. And those industrial pioneers knew that doing business in foreign countries required support and a structure for building relationships with governments and the private sector. What was true then is true today. CNI and Amcham are both instrumental in maintaining the relationships among the private sector and the Brazilian and U.S. governments. But a lot has changed in 96 years. Economic issues have become even more central to our engagement with other countries, and increasingly, a goal of U.S. foreign policy is to drive economic growth. Drive it for ourselves, of course, but drive it regionally and globally. We call that economic statecraft. How do we create conditions for open and fair economic activity among countries so every country and even every individual has a chance to compete? Now, of course, a country's economic strength in turn shapes its foreign policy and, more broadly, its role in the world. If our economies are prosperous and dynamic, we are able to invest more resources in our own people. We're also able to be good stewards of the global economy and the whole idea of a global economic order based on the rule of law and transparency and fair and open competition advances. Now, certainly, the United States and Brazil understand the complex entanglement of all these issues. What happens to one of us affects every other country in the Americas. And as the hemisphere's two largest democracies, we understand that our values must guide the way we exercise economic power. A vibrant private sector and strong economic ties with our partners are good for business, but also good for our people. I think one of the reasons Brazil is so widely admired in the world today is not just because you are getting richer, which you are, not just because you're growing a middle class, which you are, but because you have committed to lifting Brazilians out of poverty, because you are opening doors of opportunity for children, no matter who their parents, no matter where they're from, to have the same chance that every other child in Brazil would have. Now, I often describe a successful society as being like a three-legged stool. One leg has to be responsible, accountable, inclusive government. One has to be a strong, well-functioning private sector, essential for creating wealth and jobs to grow the economy. And the third leg has to be a robust civil society that speaks out for those who can't speak for themselves, who speaks for not only people living in poverty, who are victims of discrimination or lack of education or health care, but also speak out for the environment which we have all inherited, and to help hold government and business accountable when their rights are being ignored. Now, if those three legs are out of balance, the stool can't stand up. If any leg is weak, if government is corrupt, if civil society is stifled, if the private sector is irresponsible, the stool will collapse. Brazil's success story is a model of three strong legs and a very strong stool. They are in balance, a strong economy translating into shared prosperity. Brazil has ascended to the world stage as an emerging economic dynamo, lifting millions of Brazilians into the middle class while maintaining and improving democratic institutions. But for either of our countries, there is no guarantee that progress or prosperity will continue. It is our job to answer this question in a time of economic uncertainty and a constantly changing global marketplace. How do we maintain economic momentum and growth that fuels inclusive, sustainable prosperity in both our countries? Now, a big part of the answer is innovation. That's why Brazil and the United States are making innovation a key element of our bilateral relationship. That was highlighted during President Rousseff's trip to Washington last week. And we are putting these words and these aspirations into action. For example, in January of this year, Microsoft opened a new technology and innovation center in Brazil, its largest in Latin America, as an incubator for new ideas where students, NGO leaders, entrepreneurs can access cutting-edge technology. One of the first projects to spring from this facility is new software that transforms spoken words into sign language. Meanwhile, Boeing is partnering with the Inter-American Development Bank and Embraer to develop a sustainable supply chain of biofuels for aviation. This project will establish a research and development center where teams will work to develop a cost-effective way to convert sugarcane into airplane fuel. I don't need to tell you that Brazil is at the forefront of biofuels, and what you have done over 30-plus years now to produce sugarcane ethanol and to mandate its use has been extraordinary. But now we want to tackle the problem of aviation fuel together and see what we can do. Cisco is investing $500 million here over the next 3 years to create a center focused on IT entrepreneurship. Cisco and its partners will work with startups to develop and manufacture technology to support efforts in urban development, public safety, education, and health. So the American companies seeking to expand in Brazil are investing in research and development that will underpin the 21st century economy. And our two governments are eager to see these efforts succeed. Now, government won't pick winners and losers, and government cannot do the innovation and technological development that the private sector must do, but governments can work closely with business leaders to create the conditions where these ideas can take hold. Just last month, the third Joint Commission meeting on science and technology took place here in Brasilia. Minister of Science, Technology, and Innovation, Marco Antonio Ropp, and Dr. John Holdren, President Obama's science advisor, met with private sector representatives to discuss how we can better foster innovation and competitiveness. And later this year, I will send an innovation delegation to Brazil made up of some of our top entrepreneurs, educators, and tech leaders to meet with their Brazilian counterparts to discuss how we can support a thriving innovation ecosystem here in Brazil. We consider private sector innovation so important because the knowledge and technology developed are not only good for a company's bottom line, they help us meet the challenges of our time: clean energy development, urban renewal, food security, efficient and effective governance. So when companies move forward with the kind of innovative new initiatives I'm describing, they're doing more than creating jobs. They are helping to create the economy of the future. We're also working together about how to promote sustainable agriculture in sub-Saharan Africa. We're working together in counter-narcotics enforcement. So we have a lot on our agenda. One of the most exciting efforts was a partnership between the mayor of Rio de Janeiro, Eduardo Paes, and IBM. Mayor Paes saw that the city's 30 separate government agencies didn't have a way to communicate and share information efficiently. That is a problem for every government, I will confess. But he knew that poor coordination was wasteful and hindered the efficient use of government resources to serve people. So he worked with IBM in a unit called Smarter Cities to develop a first-of-its-kind ever operations center. Now data from all those agencies is compiled and stored in one place. This is obviously a very promising new venture for IBM that we expect to see replicated around the world, but it's also helping Rio as it prepares for the World Cup and the Olympics to operate in a smart, effective way. Now, the difference between a great idea that stays an idea and one that's actually implemented and yields results has a lot to do with people-to-people ties. And we need to do more to foster connections between the people of Brazil and the United States so we can all find more ways to work together and to seek common ground and common solutions. So we're excited by the programs we are setting up to encourage more student exchanges. President Rousseff has launched her Science Without Borders initiatives to send 100,000 Brazilian students abroad to study science and technology in foreign universities, and many will come to the United States during the next 4 years. She visited Harvard and MIT during her time in the U.S. last week, and we cannot wait to welcome Brazil's future scientists to our country. President Obama has announced a similar effort to send 100,000 U.S. students to universities in Latin America, including in Brazil. But this effort needs to go beyond student exchanges. There are 50 million at-risk young people across Latin America and the Caribbean who don't have the training or education they will need to compete in a modern economy. To that end, the United States is investing in the New Employment Opportunities Partnership, and the International Youth Foundation is working with private sector partners, including Microsoft, Walmart, Caterpillar, and others, to launch a series of hiring and mentoring projects across Latin America. This initiative aims to train 1 million disadvantaged youth across the region during the next 10 years. You know, we were just at the Summit of the Americas in Cartagena, and one of the common concerns expressed by leaders, particularly of fast-growing economies in Latin America, is that there are jobs in all of our countries, including the United States, but there are not often the people where the jobs are to fill the jobs. They don't have the skills, they're not in the right geographic location. So we have all these companies advertising for engineers and technicians and other skilled workers, and the jobs are not being filled. And yet our unemployment rate remains stubbornly high. That's a problem throughout our hemisphere. And so we have to be smart about how we bridge those gaps so that companies can get the employees you need in a timely way. We're also happy to see travel increasing between our two countries. I see a lot of Brazilian tourists on the street when I'm in New York. And it looks like everybody's having a good time. Well, how could you not in New York? But Brazilian tourists spent nearly $7 billion on travel and tourism-related goods in the U.S. last year. That's a rise of nearly 150% since 2009. Now, we want to see more tourism, and we want to see the efficiency of our processing tourists increase. So President Obama and I have worked together to increase our capacity to process visas from the two countries where demand is highest, Brazil and China. And we are opening new American consulates in two states. One governor is here. We're expanding the flights between Brazil and the United States to make sure our airlines can keep up with demand. So we are very excited about what this can offer. So as I look at where we stand in our new, more durable, stronger, deeper relationship, I know we've got to keep exploring new avenues for growth, but we also have to solve some of the problems that were mentioned. We need to redouble our efforts to conclude a double taxation treaty. We need to explore a bilateral investment treaty. We need to consider in the future a free trade agreement. We need to look at how the United States and Brazil can anchor economic growth in democratic values, not only for the region, but around the world. We all know there is a competition and comparison going on. There are those who look to some countries and say, you know, it would be so much more efficient if you didn't have a democracy, if you just made decisions from the top down, and boy, could we grow. Everybody would get out of our way. Well, I think Brazil and the U.S. have it right. As challenging as democracy can be, and we've been at this a very long time, and we know how difficult improving and perfecting democracy is. Can you imagine our two countries with our diverse populations, with our tendency for people to speak their minds, thinking that we could do anything other than keep focused on democracy? And I think we've done pretty well. So I think we can have our own case to be made that our economic growth, rooted in democracy and our values, will certainly withstand whatever might come in the future. And we will look for ways to send those messages to other countries in our work, for example, to support development in Africa. So for me, it's a great pleasure to be here to reiterate the messages of friendship and partnership that our two presidents conveyed last Monday, to once again highlight the strong economic partnership and business-to-business relationships between our two countries. I'm certainly committed to making sure that the private sector plays an important role in the future as we develop even greater ties. And I thank all of you for being part of expanding this essential partnership. It's good for Brazil, it's good for the United States, it's good for Latin America and our hemisphere, and I think it's good for the world. Thank you all very much.
The President of the National Confederation of Industry, Mr. Robson Andrade, and the U.S. State Secretary Hillary Clinton will leave the CNI.